Snow whipped across the ridge like a living thing. Emma Collins struggled, dragging the crate of medicine up the steep hill, her brother coughing in the canvas tent behind her. Her hands were raw, fingers numb from the cold, and the straps of the crate bit into her shoulders. Each step felt heavier than the last, each gust threatening to throw her off balance. Luke Carson watched from his horse on the ridge. He had been riding these trails for years, but he'd never seen a woman work like this, alone, relentless, stubborn as the frozen earth beneath her boots. He nudged his horse forward, boots crunching the snow, and felt the wind bite through his coat. The half-built farmhouse came into view, its walls barely chest-high, roofless, surrounded by scattered timber and tools. Smoke curled faintly from a fire pit where her brother rested, wrapped in tattered blankets. Emma saw him approach and straightened instantly, breath visible in the frigid air, hands gripping the crate like a weapon. She didn't run. She didn't plead. She just stood, chin up, daring him to say something. "Need a hand?" Luke called, dismounting. His voice was calm and even, yet carried a weight. He surveyed the crate, the trembling hands, the set jaw. "That's a lot to carry on your own." Emma's voice was steady, though her heart raced. "I'll manage." He studied the walls, the weak joints, the bare beams. "Storm's coming. Maybe 2 weeks, maybe less. You'll need bracing." She shook her head. "I can handle it." Luke's eyes swept over her face and froze on a pale scar across her left cheek. "Burns, maybe," he guessed. Emma noticed him staring and stiffened. "I'm not pretty," she whispered, defensive, almost ashamed. Luke shrugged, dismounting fully. "That's fine. I need honest, not fancy. Winter kills pretty folk first out here." For a moment, her face softened, caught between surprise and suspicion. "Why would you help me?" she asked quietly. "Because I'm tired of liars and nice dresses," he said, picking up a hammer from the ground. He tested its weight, noting the cloth-wrapped handle. "You got nails." Emma nodded toward a crate, voice barely above a whisper. "I can pay with labor. I cook, I mend, I haul." He gave a small, approving nod. Fair enough. They worked in silence, tension woven between each measured step. Emma's brother coughed, and she glanced over her shoulder, but Luke said nothing. Just watched. Waited. Finally she breathed out, hands shaking as she set the crate down. First snow in weeks. First hope in months. She wasn't sure which scared her more. Luke crouched near the fire, examining her simple tools. "You do good work," he said. "I had to," she replied. The truth hung in the air, bitter and real. The wind howled suddenly, more violently than before, and Emma looked at the sky, worry tightening her chest. Luke squinted, scanning the horizon. "We should secure the tarp tonight, if you're staying." Her stomach twisted, unsure if she could trust this stranger who had stepped into her world uninvited. But before she could answer, a snow-laden branch cracked behind them. Someone or something was watching. Emma froze. Luke's hand hovered near the hammer. "Stay close," he said, eyes narrowing toward the trees. "We're not alone." Her breath caught, heart thundering. For the first time, survival wasn't just about medicine or firewood. It was about the stranger standing beside her, and the danger that had just arrived. The wind cut sharper as evening approached, and Emma shivered despite the thick layers she had wrapped around herself. The crate sat by the half-built farmhouse, snow beginning to dust its corners. She glanced at her brother, who coughed weakly beneath the canvas tarp, and felt the familiar twist of guilt. She had sold their last horse to buy medicine, her only option, but it had left them vulnerable. Alone in the wilderness, with no tools, no help, no future. Luke Carson had already gathered a few boards, setting them against the skeletal frame of the farmhouse. He worked quietly, hammer tapping the beams in measured rhythm, eyes occasionally flicking toward Emma. His presence was steady, like a wall in the middle of a storm, but it carried the weight of someone who had lived with hardship too. "You're overexerting yourself," he said, finally breaking the silence. "The crate can wait until sunrise." Emma's jaw tightened. "I can't. He needs that medicine tonight." Her voice was sharp but controlled. "I'm the only one who can get it up here." Luke raised an eyebrow, studying her determined stance. "You don't have to do everything alone." She shook her head, shoulders hunched against both the wind and the weight of responsibility. "I don't expect anyone to help. Not anymore." He didn't respond immediately. Instead, he gestured toward the unfinished roof. "Storm's moving faster than I thought. 2 weeks from now, this cabin might not even be standing if we don't brace it properly." Emma hesitated, glancing at the scattered timber and her rudimentary tools. Each piece was a promise she had made to herself and her brother, that they could survive this winter, that they could stay alive. "I can manage," she whispered almost to herself. Luke knelt, adjusting a loose plank and tapping it with his hammer. "I've seen strong people before," he said softly. "But even the strongest can't fight snow, wind, and frost alone." His gaze met hers, unwavering. Something in it made her stomach knot, a mixture of relief and unease. She didn't answer. Instead, she set down the crate and began unpacking the medicine, each vial a lifeline. Her hands trembled slightly, not from cold, but from exhaustion and worry. Luke watched her work, silent, yet attentive. He didn't interfere, but the rhythm of his hammering against the wood seemed to anchor her, if only a little. After a few moments, he spoke again, quieter this time. "Name?" Emma glanced up, surprised at the simplicity. "Emma. Emma Collins. Luke Carson. I run cattle a few miles south of here. This farm. It's yours." He gestured to the half-built structure. "Yes. My brother and I. We made do after." Her voice faltered as she gestured toward the scarred edges of the wooden walls. "After the fire." Luke nodded, accepting the answer without question. "I'll stay until the first snow hits properly. We can start reinforcing the roof at first light. Then we'll see what you can handle on your own." Emma looked at him, weighing the offer. She had survived so long without help. Trust was not something she gave lightly. But the calm certainty in his tone, the steady presence in the wind-whipped world around her, it offered a fragile hope she hadn't allowed herself in months. Her brother coughed again, weak and ragged, and she moved to check on him, hesitating only a moment before letting herself glance back at Luke. Something shifted. Not trust fully, not yet, but a tentative acknowledgement. Maybe, just maybe, she didn't have to survive alone this time. Outside, the first snowflakes of the evening began to fall, dusting the ground and the skeletal beams of the cabin. Luke's eyes flicked toward the tree line, noting the faint shadows that moved in the snow. Threats, or merely watchers. Either way, winter would test them, and Emma would have to learn quickly whether she could let someone in. For now, though, all that mattered was tonight, the medicine, the cabin, and the stranger who had quietly stepped into her life. Tomorrow, the real work would begin. Dawn broke gray and bitter over the ridge, snow crunching underfoot as Emma tightened her coat and stepped outside. The wind had eased, but the cold cut through her sleeves like knives. Luke was already at the cabin, testing the beams, tapping joints with his hammer, muttering under his breath. "You came," she said, voice still hoarse from sleep. "I promised," he replied, eyes scanning the sky. "We start with the roof. First light. You ready?" Emma hesitated, weighing the crate of tools against her pride. "I guess so." He handed her a hammer, the wooden handle rough but solid in her palm. "You'll need to brace the rafters. Keep steady. Don't let them sway." Her fingers tightened around the tool. She had never worked alongside anyone, not since the fire, not since life had taught her to rely on herself. But there was something in the way Luke stood, shoulders squared, steady eyes, not questioning, not patronizing, simply present, that made her try. Hours passed with the rhythm of labor. Hammer against wood, saw against timber, the occasional grunt of effort. Silence hung between them, but it was companionable, not tense. When Emma dropped a nail, Luke caught it before it fell into the snow. When a beam slipped slightly, she braced it instinctively, remembering his earlier instructions. "You learn fast," he said quietly, watching her steady the shifting wood. "I had to," she muttered, cheeks flushed from exertion and cold. "Life doesn't give lessons twice." Luke's jaw tightened. "You've been through a lot." Emma looked away, tightening her grip on the hammer. "You don't need to know everything." He didn't press. He simply nodded and adjusted a plank, letting her work beside him. But as they labored, subtle trust began to form. He noticed how she handled the nails, how her movements were precise, efficient, and careful, not reckless like so many untrained hands. She noticed how he anticipated weight shifts, how he corrected the beams with a quiet authority, never condescending, just skilled. By midday, the roof frame was half up. They paused briefly, backs bent, breath steaming in the cold air. Emma watched him, noting the furrow of concentration, the way his hands, calloused and scarred, handled the tools with care. "You've seen worse winters, haven't you?" she asked, breaking the silence. "More than I care to remember," Luke replied, voice low. "And you?" Emma hesitated, then shrugged. "Fire, hunger, sickness. Not much different." He glanced at her, eyes lingering on the subtle scar along her cheek. "You survived all that alone?" She looked away, cheeks burning. "I had to." For a long moment neither spoke. Snow began to fall lightly, dusting the roof frame and the half-built walls. Then Luke straightened and gestured to the structure. "You're stronger than I thought." Emma bristled at the compliment, unsure how to take it, but didn't argue. She simply nodded, gripping the hammer again. A shadow moved in the tree line, subtle but unmistakable. Luke's hand went to the hammer at his belt. "Looks like we're being watched." Emma froze, chest tightening. "By who?" "Doesn't matter yet," he said. "Stay focused on what we're building. We'll worry about them later." She nodded, forcing herself to breathe evenly, hammering nails with renewed determination. By sunset, the frame was secure, snow beginning to cling to the wood. They stepped back, surveying their work. Exhaustion weighed on them, but so did a strange sense of accomplishment. Emma glanced at Luke, a small spark of something unspoken passing between them. Cautious respect, fragile trust, a shared understanding that they had survived this first day together. Tomorrow the real test would come, the roof, the storm, and the trust they had just begun to forge. And neither of them could know how fragile that trust might be under the scrutiny of the outside world. The morning sun filtered weakly through snow-laden clouds, casting a pale light over the half-built farmhouse. Emma rubbed her stiff shoulders, adjusting the straps of her coat as Luke handed her a plank. Today, the work was lighter, bracing rafters, securing beams, but the physical effort still demanded focus. "You've got a steady hand," Luke said, leaning on his hammer and watching her adjust the plank with precision. Emma flushed, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Steady enough," she muttered, though her fingers ached from gripping the nails. They worked side by side in silence, each movement building a rhythm. Hammer strikes echoed across the open landscape, the sound of two people learning to move as one. Snow drifted lazily around them, melting in places on the timber, leaving streaks of wet wood. Luke broke the quiet, examining a particularly weak joint. "You wrap your tools carefully," he noted, lifting a hammer wrapped in cloth. Most people don't care. You a plan. I have to, Emma replied softly. Planning keeps you alive out here. Her eyes flicked to the forest beyond the clearing, wary, but she felt a little safer with him nearby. Luke nodded, respect in his quiet gaze. Good. Makes a difference. Hours passed, and the wind picked up again. Snowflakes stung their faces, but neither faltered. They adjusted beams, braced walls, and carried timber with silent coordination. Slowly, Emma began to notice the small things. Luke's hand hovering near hers when passing a plank, the way he studied the timber before acting, the patience in his movements. During a brief break, Emma handed him a tin cup of lukewarm coffee she had boiled over the small fire. He took it with a nod, sipping carefully, eyes lingering on her. You're good at this, he said. Not just surviving, thinking. Emma felt heat rise to her cheeks again. Compliments felt foreign, especially when paired with the quiet way he seemed to notice everything about her. Her work, her scars, her exhaustion, her determination. I do what I can, she said, voice soft. The silence returned, comfortable now, not tense. Snow fell thicker, coating the roof frame with a delicate dusting. Luke leaned against a beam, eyes on the sky. Storm could hit by nightfall, he murmured. Emma glanced up, chest tightening. We'll make it, she said. We have to. As they worked, she began to share small pieces of herself. Stories of the fire that had taken their home, the nights spent tending her brother while the town whispered rumors, the meals she stretched thin just to survive. Luke listened, sometimes nodding, sometimes merely watching, but always present, never judging, never interrupting. You've carried a lot, he said finally, voice low, almost a murmur. More than most people would survive. Emma looked at him, surprised by the tenderness in his tone. I've had to, she admitted, touching the scar on her arm, a faint reminder of past hardship. Luke's eyes softened. I understand. Not everyone does. But you keep going. She felt something fragile stir in her chest. Trust, perhaps, or the faintest whisper of hope. For the first time in months, she allowed herself to imagine a future where she wasn't alone in the snow, where someone shared the weight of her burdens. As dusk fell, the wind rose sharply, rattling loose beams and flinging snow across the clearing. Luke stepped closer, bracing a plank as Emma hammered. Stay close, he murmured, his hand brushing hers briefly. Neither flinched. The contact was light, fleeting, but it lingered longer in their minds than in reality. They paused finally, surveying the frame they had built together. Exhausted, frozen, yet alive. Snow clung to their coats and hair, but the warmth of shared effort, and the quiet understanding growing between them, kept the cold at bay. In the distance, shadows moved near the tree-line. Someone or something was watching. Emma's pulse quickened. She glanced at Luke, seeing the same alert tension mirrored in his eyes. Together they faced the unknown, the fragile trust between them strengthened by labor, shared space, and the knowledge that neither could deny. They were no longer entirely alone. The morning light did little to warm the snow-covered farm. Emma tightened her coat and squinted toward the ridge where the town road bent into the forest. Footprints appeared in the freshly fallen snow, too organized, too deliberate to belong to wildlife. Luke spotted them at the same moment. He set down a plank, hands tense on the hammer. Visitors, he said, his voice low. Not the friendly kind. Emma's stomach nodded. From town. Luke nodded, eyes scanning the horizon. Church, merchant. Maybe others. They've been watching. Hours earlier, they had worked in companionable silence, reinforcing walls, adjusting beams, and bracing the roof. Now, the rhythm of labor was broken by the distant crunch of boots and wagon wheels on the snow. Emma's brother coughed inside the canvas tent, oblivious to the growing tension. A wagon came into view first, dusting snow into the air. Behind it, 3 men dismounted, well-dressed, coats stiff, eyes sharp with judgment. At their head was Preacher Whitmore, flanked by Amos Pritchard, the local merchant, and 2 elders from the church. "Brother Carson," Whitmore's voice carried across the clearing, steady and accusatory. "This woman is known for sins, rumors the town tried to bury. Associating with her dishonors your name and hers." Luke's jaw hardened, but he didn't move. Emma stepped forward instinctively, chin lifted, standing beside him. Her scar caught the morning sun, pale against flushed skin. "We're working," she said. "No more, no less." Whitmore's eyes narrowed. "Rumors have weight. You endanger your standing, your reputation, and this arrangement. Pritchard here made you an offer. Honest work at my boarding house. You will avoid scandal and be provided for." Emma's heart thudded. Pritchard's oily smile didn't hide the calculation behind it. "I don't want your charity," she said quietly, voice steady despite the cold fear curling in her stomach. Luke stepped closer, placing himself slightly in front of her. "This isn't about charity," he said. "It's about survival. She built this cabin with her hands. You'll respect that." Pritchard's smile faltered. "Even so, Carson, you know the rules of town. Association brings judgment. Reputation matters." Emma's hands curled into fists. "Our lives matter more than their gossip." Whitmore leaned closer, voice like a blade. "Do you think your work here absolves past sins? People don't forget, Miss Collins." Luke's eyes flashed icy and precise. "We don't answer to gossip. We answer to reality. And reality says this cabin stands because she's honest, capable, and hardworking. Not because she's pretty or proper." A tense silence followed. Snowflakes drifted between the 2 groups. The men stared, calculating and judging, while Emma felt a strange surge of defiance. She had survived fire, hunger, illness, and loneliness. Now she would not bow to whispers and pointed fingers. "You hear that?" Luke murmured almost to himself, but loud enough for Emma to catch. "The town doesn't get to decide what's right here." Emma met his eyes, a flicker of something unspoken passing between them. Trust, unity, shared rebellion against judgment. For a fleeting moment, she allowed herself to hope that perhaps she and Luke could weather this storm together. Whitmore muttered something under his breath and signaled the men to mount their horses again. Pritchard's gaze lingered on the cabin and the pair standing firm within it, then shifted toward town, defeated for now but plotting. Luke turned to Emma, voice quiet but firm. "They'll come back. People like that never give up." Emma's hands relaxed, still clutching the edge of a plank. "Then we'll be ready. Together." Snow swirled around them, frosting the half-built cabin. Inside, her brother slept peacefully, unaware of the judgment and scrutiny bearing down from the town. Outside, Emma and Luke stood shoulder to shoulder, bonded now by labor, shared risk, and the unspoken promise that whatever storms came, literal or metaphorical, they would face them together. The cabin felt smaller somehow, snow pressing against the walls like the weight of the world. Emma sat on a rough-hewn stool, arms wrapped around her knees, staring at the unfinished roof. The wind rattled the timber, carrying whispers of judgment from the town that she could not ignore. Her brother shivered beneath the canvas tarp, coughing weakly, and she rubbed his back, trying to calm both him and herself. But inside, her thoughts swirled like the snow outside. Doubt, fear, and a creeping sense of futility. Luke moved quietly beside her, adjusting a beam near the corner of the cabin. He didn't speak at first, giving her space, but his presence was steady, a contrast to the storm both outside and in her mind. Finally, he set down his hammer and said softly, "They'll come back." Emma's jaw tightened. "They're just words. Gossip. Threats. Words have power when repeated, Luke replied, voice low. "Especially in a town that loves to judge. You know that better than anyone." She looked at him, frustration flaring. "I survived fire, I survived hunger, sickness, loneliness. I don't need their approval." Her voice shook, betraying more than she intended. "Why can't you understand that?" Luke paused, eyes meeting hers. "I do. I've seen people break under less. I don't want that for you. For us." Emma's shoulders slumped. "I thought I could do this alone. I've always done everything alone. I didn't want anyone's help, didn't want anyone's pity. And now I have someone who cares, and I don't know how to handle it. I'm scared, Luke. Scared they'll take it away. Scared I'll fail. Scared I'll lose you like everyone else I've ever trusted." Luke knelt beside her, careful not to crowd her space. "Emma, you're not alone anymore. I'm not going anywhere. Not because it's easy, not because the world will approve, but because I choose to stand with you. Every day, through storms, cold, snow, gossip, whatever comes. I choose you." Her eyes filled, but she didn't look away. "And if I fail? If the winter breaks the roof before we finish? If the town comes back with anger this time?" Luke's hand brushed hers, tentative at first, then firmer. "Then we rebuild. Together. Failure doesn't mean giving up. It means learning, surviving, and growing stronger." Emma swallowed hard, tears prickling. She hadn't let anyone touch her, not truly in months. Not since fire, not since loss, not since the world had taught her to depend on no one. And yet, here was Luke, standing steady, offering partnership, understanding, and care without demands. She looked at the half-built roof, the walls they had raised together, the cabin that stood despite storms and snow, and for the first time, she allowed herself to see something beyond survival possibility. Not perfection. Not safety. Just hope. "I'm scared of letting you in," she admitted quietly. "Scared I'll break something we've built together." Luke smiled faintly, weathered hands still brushing hers. "We're both broken in places. That's why this works. We build together, and that makes it stronger than anything alone could be." The wind rattled the cabin, snow drifting against the gaps in the walls, but inside a fragile warmth spread. She could feel it, not just from the small fire, not just from shared labor, but from the unspoken promise between them. Emma took a deep breath, exhaling slowly. "Then, we finish it. Together. No matter what comes." Luke nodded. Together. They sat in quiet solidarity, snow dusting their shoulders, the storm outside a reminder of the challenges ahead. But for the first time in months, Emma felt the faintest whisper of something stronger than fear: trust. And trust, she realized, was worth the risk. Morning broke crisp and bright, snow glittering across the half-built cabin. Emma and Luke moved quickly, finishing the final touches on the roof frame, tension in every motion. The previous night's low point had left them both quiet, reflective, but determined. From the ridge, a cloud of movement caught Emma's eye. Horse hooves crunched the snow with deliberate purpose. Townspeople were coming again, more numerous than before. At the front rode Preacher Whitmore, his face stern. Amos Pritchard's smug presence followed, and behind them, a scattering of curious neighbors, eyes wide with gossip and judgment. Luke straightened, hand brushing the hammer at his belt. "They've brought backup," he muttered, eyes scanning the approach. Emma's pulse quickened, but she squared her shoulders. "We've built this. We won't step back." The wagon stopped at the edge of the clearing, and Whitmore dismounted first, flanked by elders. Pritchard followed with a forced grin, his merchant's pride bruised from the last encounter. "Carson," Whitmore said, voice cutting across the crisp morning air, "you've led us here again. This woman, Miss Collins, is unsuitable. The town watches. You risk your name, your property, and her reputation. Luke stepped forward, placing himself beside Emma. Suitability doesn't matter out here. Hard work, honesty, and survival do. Whitmore's eyes narrowed. Do you think we'll stand by and let rumors and shame go unchallenged? Emma took a breath, meeting the preacher's gaze steadily. We don't answer to rumors. We answer to our lives. A tense pause followed. The townspeople murmured, glancing at the cabin, at the duo, at the snow-laden timber that spoke of months of labor. Pritchard shifted, voice oily and insistent. Miss Collins, my offer stands. Honest work, a roof, protection. You can avoid a scandal. You can be safe. Emma shook her head slowly. Safety isn't living. Not for me. Not for my brother. Not if it comes at the cost of honesty or pride. Luke added, voice firm. We've built this together. The town doesn't get to tell us how to live. And anyone who thinks otherwise, well, they're welcome to try to stop us. Whitmore took a step forward, jaw tight. This will not be tolerated. You defy God, you defy society, and... Emma cut him off, voice ringing with clarity. We defy nothing. We survive. We work. We help each other. That's all. For a heartbeat, the clearing fell silent. The snow drifted gently over the cabin, dusting the walls they had raised together. And then Luke spoke, calm but unyielding. If anyone here doubts the work, the honesty, or the strength it took to build this, step closer. See it for yourself. Slowly, the townspeople approached, curiosity overcoming judgment. They inspected the frame, the nailed beams, the steady walls holding the weight of winter. The timber creaked under the snow, but it held. Whitmore's eyes flickered over the structure. Pritchard's forced smile faltering. Emma stepped beside Luke, chin high. This isn't pretty, she said quietly, more to herself than to anyone else. It isn't fancy, but it's real, honest, and it stands. A hush fell over the crowd. Judgment wavered. They could argue, they could gossip, but the cabin, built through labor and truth, spoke louder than words. Whitmore swallowed hard, Pritchard's pride cracked, and for the first time, the town saw what Emma and Luke had built. Not just a cabin, but a life formed from shared trust, sweat, and courage. Luke placed a steady hand on Emma's shoulder. We do it our way. Together. Emma met his eyes and nodded. Together. The tension broke like ice under a spring sun. Snow drifted over boots, over planks, over fear. The town could watch, could whisper, but the truth of their labor, of their bond, could not be undone. The wind had finally eased, leaving a pale winter sun glinting across the snow-dusted cabin. Emma tightened the last shutter, checking the walls one final time. Every nail, every beam, every plank bore witness to the months of struggle, trust, and quiet determination. Luke appeared from the woods, snow melting on his coat, carrying a bundle of tools and a small stack of firewood. Finished? He asked with a grin, voice carrying warmth that contrasted the frosted air. Emma smiled, the corners of her lips lifting genuinely for the first time in months. Finished enough. The cabin can survive the winter. And so can we. He dropped the wood by the fire pit and extended a hand. Then I guess it's time for the next step. She glanced at his hand, then up into his steady eyes, feeling the weight of unspoken questions, promises, and possibilities. Next step. Luke's smile softened. Not just surviving. Living. Together. Fully. Emma's heart fluttered. Months of hardship, labor, and quiet trust had brought them here. She nodded slowly, meeting his gaze. Together, she echoed. They moved inside, gathering the warmth of the fire. Snow drifted against the cabin walls, but inside, The glow from the flames made every shadow soft. Emma brought out the small box of books she had saved, and Luke stacked the last of the firewood. They worked side by side in comfortable silence. No words needed, the rhythm of shared life already established. After a while, Emma settled on the bench he had built outside the cabin, staring at the horizon where the first hints of spring peeked through the snow. Luke joined her, brushing a snowflake from her shoulder. His hand lingered near hers, not touching, just present. "I never thought I'd see this," Emma murmured. "Trust, stability, even hope." Luke's eyes softened. "You built it. I just stood with you." She turned to him, courage and vulnerability mingling. "And I want more. Not just survival. Not just work. I want a life with you. Honest. Real." Luke's gaze darkened with emotion. Sincerity etched into every line of his weathered face. "Then let's build that life, Emma. Not pretty, not fancy, honest. Every step, every moment together." She smiled, touching her scar lightly. Scarred, not perfect, not delicate. Real. Luke reached for her hand, waiting for her consent before lacing fingers with hers. Real is enough. More than enough. They sat side by side, watching the sun rise higher, the snow glinting like glass, the wind finally quiet. And in that quiet, trust became certainty, and partnership became love. From the town, a wagon rolled slowly up the ridge. Families and neighbors approached cautiously, tools and baskets in hand. Preacher Whitmore, Amos Pritchard, and the others hung back, unsure how to react. But the town had come not to scold, not to judge, but to help. Emma stood, taking Luke's hand. "This is our barn," she said, voice firm but welcoming. Luke nodded. "Our cabin. Our land. Our life. And we built it together. No one else can take that away." The townspeople began to unload supplies, helping with the garden plot, stacking firewood, and reinforcing the barn frame. Laughter and conversation grew, blending with the wind and the creaking of the timber. Slowly, suspicion gave way to respect. Emma watched Luke work alongside the newcomers, feeling a warmth that had little to do with fire. This was more than survival, it was belonging. Love and community are intertwined, each reinforcing the other. As the afternoon faded, Luke extended a hand to Emma once more. "Marry me?" he asked quietly. "When you're ready." Emma smiled, squeezing his hand gently. "When the wildflowers bloom full. I'll say yes when the world feels alive again." He nodded, lips brushing her hair, neither rushing, both savoring the quiet perfection of that moment. Snow melted slowly, streams forming along the cabin walls. Life, like the thawing winter, had begun anew. Evening fell, and the cabin glowed warmly. Emma and Luke sat on the bench outside, the barn behind them, the garden plot ready for spring. Hands intertwined, eyes fixed on the horizon, they understood something simple and profound. Honest work, honest hearts, and shared struggle could create something stronger than beauty, stronger than appearances, stronger than fear. The mountains watched, silent and patient. And in that patience, Emma and Luke knew they had finally built something unshakable. Love born from labor, trust, and resilience. If you love stories of hope and unexpected kindness, hit that like button and subscribe so you never miss a story that will touch your heart.